Today we are turbocharging my 2007 Toyota Corolla with this turbo kit from turbokits.com, and we're also going to be installing a few extra bits here, such as new oil pan, new battery, and new wideband, just to make this a full, complete, easy install. So, some basic info about the car here. This is a 2007 Toyota Corolla LE, 1ZZ FE, completely stock and 4-speed automatic transmission. For the past 4 years I've been running this short ram intake, and now it is time to put a little spoolie thing in there. So besides a few very small things which do nothing for engine strength, such as monkey wrench racing fuel rail and oil catch can, this engine has not been touched at all. And the other thing you might be wondering is how much mileage it has on it. It currently has 170,000 miles, so it's relatively high mileage, I guess. I mean, maybe not for a Corolla. So obviously it is not quite the same like putting a turbo kit on a brand new engine. Obviously this thing's been used a lot. But regardless, I'm still confident that this car here is going to be able to take this just fine. Now you know the car, and now you know the setup. And now let's get everything installed. Turbokits.com does include a full set of instructions. Now I did have to print this out myself. They only send the instructions via PDF. For the most part, I'm going to be following their instructions, but I'm going to do them in maybe slightly a different order. So we've got a lot of parts here, and the first thing that I'm going to install is the oil pan. The reason I want to do this first is because I have to wait for the RTV around the oil pan to cure before I can fill oil back in it. So if I do this first, then by the time everything else is installed, then oil is ready to be filled in here. So there we have it. Let's go ahead, get the Corolla up in the air, and then let's get started. While I'm waiting for all of the oil to drain out, I'm going to go ahead and very quickly remove my front strut bar here because it's going to get in the way. I'm going to need access to behind the engine here when we take out the header. So this has got to come out. And since I'm already up here, before I touch anything electronic, I'm going to remove the battery. Oh, this is a heavy battery. Well, oil pan's out. So some of you may be a little confused as to why I'm replacing the oil pan entirely. After all, the instructions do say to just tap into the old one. Pretty much in addition to this being a higher capacity oil pan, the main reason I wanted to switch is because this has got these two extra plugs here. Now what I can do is take out this plug and install this fitting, so instead of tapping into the oil pan here, all I need to do is no drilling at all. I just take out this plug and install this fitting, and now I have the perfect place for the turbo oil drain to return to the oil pan here. So to show you how easy this is, instead of drilling a hole in here, all I need to do is just take my Allen's here and... oh, it's a bit too small. Oh dear, this is the largest size hex wrench I have. I've got an idea. So what I'm gonna do is take a small hex wrench, a very small one, and this extra one, and let's see if this works. I've done this before on other projects, and it's worked. Oh, look at that. And there it goes. I am a genius. There is the plug out. Now we've got this new fitting here. Let me just test to make sure. Yep, it threads in super nicely. All right, now we're talking. I'm gonna use some high temperature thread sealant just to make sure we're not gonna get any leaks from there. And now we thread it in. and that should be good. And there we go. Now I've got a nice oil pan with the perfect spot for an oil return line. So now I've got this little bag of studs and nuts, so I've got to put the studs into the block of the engine, and then we can mount the oil pan up. Oil pan is installed. Now the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to remove the exhaust. So let's get to that. So my plan is to take out mid pipe. What I've got to do is take out this oxygen sensor here. Once that's out, unbolt it from the header up there, and then unbolt it from the muffler down there, and then this whole mid pipe section should drop down. Then after this is all gone, we can unbolt the header. It is being real stubborn, so forget it. I'll deal with it later. I'll just move on from this and just unbolt the mid pipe from the header and the muffler and take it out. So instead of taking out the oxygen sensor by removing it from the exhaust, I'm going to take out the oxygen sensor by unplugging it inside. Now all I need to do is just peel the carpet back, and that's the plug right there. Once I take the plug out, then I just need to push the grommet in the floor out, and then the O2 sensor wiring should come out. All right, it's unplugged. There it is. So I'll figure out how to remove it from the exhaust later, but at least now I'm about halfway to taking out the mid pipe. Just need to unbolt it from the axle back and take out the little bracket back here, and then the mid pipe is coming out. Well, the exhaust is out. First big piece of the car's out. I've been thinking, after all, I do live in Colorado, I'm pretty sure I've got to find a way to put this pre-cat on this system. I'm gonna figure out how to do that later. For now, it's not a concern of mine, but we don't need to worry about the mid pipe for now. The next thing that we've got to think about is the header. It is finally time to pull the header off. So I've got to take out the heat shield, 4 bolts, and then 5 bolts that hold it to the head. First broken bolt, question mark? Looks like it. Well, in all honesty, I don't care about the heat shield bolts breaking because I don't need them. I just need them out so I can remove the heat shield. Come on, either come out or break. I don't care which, just pick one. Come on, just snap off or do something interesting. There it goes. Broke off. I forgot, I need to take out this O2 sensor. And there we go, O2 sensor is out, and heat shield is out. So, it is time to take out the manifold. There's 5 bolts, there's 1 in the middle, 2 on the sides, and 2 on the top. So hopefully we don't break any manifold studs, because that would make this day a lot more difficult. As I say that, wait, maybe it just slipped off. Oh, it rounded. Ah, that would explain it. Oh my goodness, it came out so nicely. See, I rounded it because I used a 12 point, now I've got a 6 point, and the bolts come out. Hello, little buddy. You have not seen the world since 2007. I'm getting pretty lucky so far. Everything's looking good. Alright, just come loose. I'm bored now. Come on. How many times? There we go. What are the odds that this last nut here breaks? If it does, I'm going to be insanely irritated because the other four came out perfectly. Well, it looks like I don't need to worry because it's also perfect. Oh, actually, hold on. What am I doing? I have a power ratchet. Why am I undoing it by hand? Oh, okay. Well, the entire stud on this one has just come out. This car is really fighting me on this. It's saying, no, I want to stay naturally aspirated. No. I don't understand what's going on here. Every bolt is out. The manifold just refuses to come out. Only thing that was keeping me from pulling this out was the support bracket, which I forgot to take the 14mm bolt out of. But now that's out, as you can see, the header is gone. So out with the old and in with the new. Here we go. We've got the turbo manifold and we've got the turbocharger here and we've got the stud kit. So what I'm going to do is install these 4 studs into these 4 threaded holes. Here are the 4 studs, and they just get threaded in one at a time. There's 1, and there's 2, that's 3, that is number 4. This is where all my gaskets are. So I've got to take out the square looking gaskets, which I think is this one, right? It's totally gonna fit there. Voila. Oh, wait, hold on. The gasket's fighting me. Hang on, why are you fighting me? There we go. Just stay on there. And here we've got the turbocharger. So let's see. If this way is the engine block, then the turbo mounts this way, which means this is the orientation of it. Because the turbine, the turbo inlet, is going to be facing the left side of the car. Go, put the washer in place, then put the first nut on there. The second washer, here's the second nut. Third washer, and third nut. This one's actually going to be quite tricky to get on there. Lift it up a little bit, just to give the nut space. Aha, there we go. Last washer and the last nut. So it looks like I'm not going to need to clock this turbo. It looks like everything is already set. So thank you very much, turbokits.com. It looks like they've made my job easier because I don't need to clock it now. All I need to do is just throw it in the car because this is the right orientation for everything. That's 1 done. Awesome, that's 2 done. Halfway there. And this is number 3 done. Oh, and there it is. The turbo and manifold are now together. Congratulations. What I want to do very quickly is reorient the wastegate here so that this little nipple here comes out straight like this onto this one. That way I can just run a very short vacuum hose from here to here and be done with that, rather than have to route a vacuum hose all the way around the turbo inlet and loop around to here. So I'm not changing the location of the wastegate, I'm only changing just the orientation of it. I'm just going to undo the C-clip here on the arm and undo these two 10mm bolts and just rotate it and then put everything back together. There we go. Arm can come off. And that looks like that actually is the perfect position. Let's go. So as you can see here, there are 6 holes drilled, so I can have this in really any orientation I need. And this way, right here, looks pretty perfect for what I'm trying to achieve. The nipple comes this way and meets right here. Now I just need to rotate this arm down just so it's in line with the door again. Tilt it up. That way gravity can keep the internal wastegate door closed and then I don't put any extra forces on it. Now I just figure out what makes it tick. Aha, that's the one. And I'm just gonna check the wastegate door and it looks pretty good. And there's no play in it, it's not moving around by itself. It looks good. Now for the vacuum line, I just need a pretty short one that goes from the wastegate here to this inlet. So let's see, about there to there. So I need about that much and cut. There we go. And this one also looking good. So there we go, the turbo is all set up and everything. Now I think it is time to put it in the car. Actually, just kidding. I need to put in the fittings first. This is very important. I need to put in the fittings for water, for oil drain, oil feed, then we can put it in the car. Here we go, water fittings first. And now with the fitting, we've got this barb end here, so I'm going to have it pointing down. I'm not going to have it pointing up this way because then it's going to run into the bolts up here. Doesn't make any sense. Alright, there's one. I'm just going to have it hand tight for now, and then when all the fittings are on there, I'll tighten them all up at the same time. Another crush washer, another barb, another crush washer. There we go. And now we install the oil fittings. So I'll do the return fitting first, so little orange cap, gone. Now we've got this fitting, so just to make sure there's no leaks, I'm just going to use some of this high temperature thread sealant here too. There it goes. And that's it. Now we've got the oil feed line here, so pull off the orange cap. Then should be this one. Yep, looks good. So I'm just gonna put a touch of high temp thread sealant on there, not too much, especially because this is the feed line. I want to make sure none of this thread sealant goes into the turbo, so I'm just going to be very delicate with the thread seal. Alright, we've got all the fittings on, I've made sure they're all tight. I'll have to see if the entire thing will fit all together, otherwise I'll have to disconnect the manifold, bolt this up to the car first and then bolt the turbocharger on there. Well, I feel quite silly because I put the wrong fitting on for the turbo feed. I used this little fitting. It's actually this one, so it's a good thing I caught it before I put it into the car. Otherwise, I would be beating myself up about it a lot more if I put it into the car with that fitting on there instead, and then I had to service it in the car, which, even though a bit of a silly mistake, I did realize something from it though. Because this is kind of tricky to get to once everything's in the car, what I'm going to do is put the oil feed line on first before I put this all in. That way I don't need to fiddle around with this feed line here while the turbo's in the car, because this is kind of a tricky spot to get to. Well, everyone, I have made two very silly mistakes so far in this install. First mistake, the whole way I had the turbo oriented. That was wrong. This is how I have it now. Before, what I did, this was on the left side. I've now moved it to the right side, and the way I figured out how this was wrong was because when I had it the other way, the downpipe kind of went into the engine block. So I'm not a professional mechanic, as you can tell, but based on what I know about how the world works, I'm quite sure I'm not meant to be putting this through the engine. So I looked back through the instructions, and sure enough, it's supposed to be facing this way. And now that it faces like this, the turbo feed is actually now out in the open, so I don't even have to worry about putting the line on right now. Now, I can go ahead and put all these studs in. So there's one part of the downpipe here, this one, where I need the short stud. So let me figure out which one that is. Let's see, and it will be this one. So this is the one that needs this shorter stud. So we'll thread it into there. So now that we've got all of this taken care of and everything is back in order, let's go ahead and cut the heater core hose so we can route our coolant lines. So this right here is the coolant line that we're going to cut. Here on the instructions it says to cut into the heater core supply line, and here is the picture, which translates to this hose right here. The instructions do say to crimp the hose before cutting it, that way you don't lose coolant, but I have nothing to crimp it with, so I'm just going to cut it and have my drain pin underneath, and whatever comes out, comes out. But before I do that, I'm going to set up these two water hoses here, and I'm going to install the plastic fitting in them first before I cut the line. That way I can cut the line and put these new lines straight on there. Gotta be careful of these so I don't cut myself. So I've thought about it a little bit, and I have decided to stray from the instructions slightly and put the lines on the turbocharger first, and then put the turbocharger in the car, then cut the heater core lines and attach these new braided lines to them. And the reason I want to do it this way instead is because getting these lines on these barbs here may be a little bit more difficult when the turbo is actually in the car, especially this back one here that is a little bit more difficult to reach. Note to self, cardboard boxes do not make a very effective workbench. Maybe I should turn this fitting up. Let me see. No, the hose doesn't really want to fit there if I turn that fitting around. Okay. Since I'm at it, I might as well just install the oil return line since it's going to be under the car. I don't think it would be difficult to reach from under the car, but I don't think it'll hurt to just put it on now. And once the turbo's in the car, then connect it to the oil pan. No harm, no foul. This is the front of the engine. I want this to face the oil pan, which is there, so boom, switch it around. In case you're wondering, I'm not going to put the feed line on right now. It's not necessary because look at how easy that is to reach. It's right here. Step 1, new manifold gasket. Have a look at that. Before I continue putting everything together, I just want to appreciate that this is in here now. It's here. It's in here. Pretty much since I started making these car videos here on this channel, my eventual goal was always, I want to boost the Corolla. And now it's here. The turbo's bolted up. And I just need to do plumbing, and I just need to route the exhaust and route intercooler and do fuel and engine management. The big part is done. I can't stare at it all day. I've got to keep working on it. It's gonna be even cooler once it's done. I just wanted to pause and just take a moment to really appreciate where I've got so far. This is a very cool moment, but you guys want to see me put the rest of this together and then get this car running with the turbocharger. That's what we're gonna do now. We've got a few lines here that are not connected. Well, guess what? We're gonna connect them. Now it is time, after all this time, we have to cut the heater hose. I think I've said it 3 times so far in this video, but now and only now are we finally getting to it. So I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and just snip right here and connect the lines. I've never purposely given my car a coolant leak before. I haven't cut it totally straight. Alright, coolant lines are set. Now that this hose here is gone, I'm just going to throw on this K&N filter, just so we don't get anything in there while I continue the rest of the work. Now that the coolant lines are done, before we move on to working with the oil lines, according to the instructions here, we should first put in the air filter and then the downpipe. Now I've already taken the filter out of the box and I've already looked in there, and it looks pretty much impossible to get the filter installed from the top. So it looks like I'm gonna have to go either from the bottom, or the instructions recommended to go in from the side. So take off the wheel and go in from the side and install the filter. I'm going to try installing the filter from the bottom first because I kind of don't feel like taking the wheel off, but if it's necessary, the wheel is going to come off. Well, that did not go well. So let me explain my situation here. Basically, I can't put it through the side of the car because my sway bar is too thick and this car is too low. So there's not enough clearance for the filter to go in from the side. And to install the filter from the bottom, I have to route it up where the downpipe is going to be, and then squeeze it in between several different power lines, power steering lines, and eventually seat there. But in the meantime, I'm going to route the oil drain, the oil feed, and then the intercooler piping and the intercooler. And then after that, we'll deal with the air filter and the downpipe and whatever. So the oil drain line is going to be the easiest to do first because I've already got a place to put the hose. It's a little tricky. I think this barb is a little larger than what this hose was designed for, but I think I can make it work. I wonder if this tape here is restricting it too much. Let me pull this off and see if I can make this work now. It's slowly getting there. It's really fighting me, but it's slowly getting there. Well, one thing's for sure, once I put this on, this thing is never coming off. You know what? It's got enough on there. I think it should be fine. Now we can tighten it up. Now for the oil feed, I'm teeing off of the oil pressure sensor down there. My dilemma was that I didn't have a socket large enough for it, and I didn't have a wrench large enough for it. All I had that would work is this, the Bolt Rounder 9000. I'm kidding, of course. I've never actually had a problem using these. And it's a pretty tight squeeze, but I can get it in here. Start turning it, and the sensor is moving out. Admittedly very slowly, but it's still coming out nonetheless. So that is the idea. I'm just removing that and then using this supplied T in its place. That way one end goes to the sensor, the other end goes to the turbocharger. There it is. Oil pressure sensor is out. I'm looking at the instructions here, and I'm seeing a few things that I'm not too sure about. So this is done, this is done, this is, I've got this picture set up. So pretty much the way this goes now is this is in the T and this end of the T goes into the block. What I'm confused about is how to hook up the feed line, the feed hose to here, because I don't have a fitting for that. And the fitting in this picture looks like the fitting that I have here on the turbocharger, but the fitting I have here on the turbocharger has to go there because otherwise I can't connect a line to the turbocharger. But now that that's there, I can't connect a line to this T, but it's okay. I'm just going to go run to the hardware store and pick up a 1/8 NPT fitting, male to male, and then install that here and then put that fitting into the hose, and then that should have that sorted out. So I've just put the fitting in there now. I can't attach the line to it because I don't have a male adapter on there. It's fine. I'm just gonna leave it there, go to the hardware store, get an adapter for it. I'm not gonna make a big deal of it. But from here, let's just pretend the feed line is finished and let's just move on to the intercooler lines. To install the intercooler, I've got to pull the front bumper off and that way we can mount the intercooler on the crash bar and then mount all the intercooler lines behind it. So I'm gonna pull the bumper off and then we can get going on that. Well, I've got some of it like kind of attached. I mean, it's on the floor. I'm doing a little bit of experimenting. I think I have to mount the piping a little different than the instructions just because now I've got a larger oil pan there. So the intercooler piping doesn't clear the oil pan like it would with the stock oil pan. So I'm just doing a little bit of testing. Might be able to make it work like the instructions say. Might have to do things slightly different. It's okay. But this whole time I've been installing this turbo setup and the naturally aspirated setup has been here the whole time. So step 1, boom, unplugged. Step 2, and step 3, let's just take this out of here. Here is the intercooler. This is the mounting hardware, so I've got to figure out how the mounts work for this. Should be easy. Guessing like this. My intercooler is a little different to the ones in the instructions, so that's why I've got to figure this out on my own. But I think from what it looks like the Vibrant intercooler here mounts like this, and then it'll mount to the crash bar. I'm just gonna put the mounts on like this very loosely just so I can figure out if this is really how it works or not. So if the mounts are like this, then it should bolt to the crash bar, something like that. Looks about right. So situation update, as you just saw, intercooler is now in. I've put the blow-off valve on as well. And off camera, I worked with the air filter again, and I've got it on. So the air filter is right down here, and as you can see, it is not perfect. One, I kind of bent it up a little bit getting it in there, but I didn't tear anything. The filter is just a little bit bent. And then right back there, as you can see, it's not perfectly flush against the turbo there. But it's good enough there to where the air filter is not going to slide off. The hose clamp is keeping it on there pretty well. So I'm not worried. The air filter is going to do its job just fine. But soon we will fabricate some sort of intake system for this car, just so we can move the air filter somewhere else. So now that we've got the air filter taken care of and we got the intercooler system taken care of, now we can finish up the turbo feed line. So I bought this little 1/8 NPT male-to-male adapter from Home Depot, and this should be perfect for connecting the feed line up to the oil pressure adapter. So let's go ahead, install this, and get this oil feed line taken care of. And there we go, feed line is connected. I'm going to install the downpipe now since I didn't do that earlier. So I'm going to prepare the downpipe to go in by installing the 3 oxygen sensors I'm going to use. So up here is going to be the upstream O2 sensor, down here will be the downstream O2 sensor, and this will be the wideband O2 sensor. So they're all plugged up right now. I gotta take the plugs out and then put the sensors in, and then we will install the downpipe. So the downstream O2 sensor was basically being pretty much impossible to take out from the old exhaust, so ran to the parts store and got a new one. And lastly, in this box here, we've got the wideband O2 sensor. Alrighty, now the downpipe is set up, we've got all of the O2 sensors on here. Now let's throw it in the car. So that is all the difficult stuff done, and now we are on the home stretch. So what I'm gonna do now is connect vacuum lines. So I have a vacuum line for the blow-off valve and then a vacuum line going to the boost gauge. So the boost gauge that I'm using is actually a boost gauge and an AFR gauge all in one. So as you can see here, there's 2 numbers that can be read out. And this is an electronic gauge, so the way this works is it takes a vacuum source from here, goes to this electronic sensor, and then this wire goes into the cabin. And then in the cabin, we plug it into this, and this is the main sort of control box. So signal from the boost sensor here, and then signal from the oxygen sensor on the exhaust, both come into this main control unit. And then both of those signals are sent out of a wire from here, right to the gauge. And that'll make more sense once everything is connected. But for now, my main goal is to have this wire sent through the firewall and into the cabin, which should be easy because I've got the wiring for my fog light here going through that grommet there. This is the setup so far. So here's what I've found. I was wrong about some of the wiring for this. So this is sort of the main control, what I've been calling the main control. This is actually just a controller for the wideband O2 sensor and data logging it and whatever. This is also where it's going to get power to the gauge as well, but the boost gauge doesn't have anything to do with this. The wiring for the boost gauge sensor, I suppose, what we installed up there, this goes directly to the gauge. This doesn't go here. This just goes directly here. And so here the wideband O2 has gone around and connected in here, and then there's another wiring harness from there, this one, which then connects up here to the gauge. So I was thrown off a little bit, but we are back on track. So I'm gonna get this wire and then this wire both sent up through the dashboard, through the A-pillar up there, and then I'll have the gauge pod sitting right around there. So the gauge is in. This gauge pod, the adhesive is not super sticky on it, but it should be good enough. And now all we do is just connect power. So we've got a few things to connect. Got to connect constant power. We've got to connect the dimmer. We've got to connect ignition power. And we've got to connect ground. So I've gone ahead, and as you can see, all the wires are gone. I've tucked them behind the dashboard, and they're tucked right up there. So they're nice and out of the way. This is just where they're gonna be now. So the way I'm gonna get power to the gauge here is to just steal some power from the radio. Since there's only one gauge, this is not going to take so much power where it's gonna blow a fuse or whatever. At least it shouldn't. And I did the same thing with my Subi there, except 3 of the gauges are connected to the radio. 3 of those, well, I guess 2 right now, are connected to the clock. It still works perfectly fine, so I haven't blown any fuses, no nothing. So based on what I've observed there, if I connect the power for this gauge to the radio, there should be no issue. Now, in order to actually connect it to the radio, we've got to take the radio out so I can see the wires. Let's get to that. Oh, that's right, because there's no power. It can't tell that I've got the key in. So I can't. Nice. What happened here? And there we have it, the gauge is all wired up, stealing some power from the radio. We'll see if everything works or not. If this system doesn't work, then I'll just fix it. But I don't see why not. I mean, I've done it in that car. I don't see why I can't do it in this car with less gauges. Now, before we finish up here by installing fuel injectors and the fuel management, I'm going to put the front bumper back on. Because the intercooler is already installed, so that means that I don't need the bumper removed anymore. And here we go, injectors are in. The wires are a little bit messy, I suppose. I might tuck them away or something later. I'm not concerned about it at all right now. I just need to make sure that they work. But now that the injectors are in, now it's time to start playing with other electronics. So this is the boom slang wiring harness for the AAM FIC for this car. And then here is the AAM FIC itself. So the ECU is behind here, it's underneath the glove box. So we're gonna pull the glove box out and then we'll plug in the new stuff. What the? And just like that, everything is technically plugged in. I know it's a bit of a mess. Of course, the ECU shouldn't be on the floor. But this is how I'm just going to leave it, at least for the first startup. I was having a little trouble tucking away the boom slang wiring harness because obviously the stock wiring harness has got a lot of wires on it. This has got a lot of wires on it. The wires have to take up space somewhere. So it's a bit challenging trying to find that space, especially because, I mean, this gets in the way. And then that's not even counting the fact that I've got to put this somewhere too. So I'll leave it like this for the first startup at least. That way, if there's any issues, I can revert or do something, whatever needs to be done. I'm not expecting any issues, but You never know. So I've been doing a little bit of test fitting with the battery, and the stock battery tie down just isn't working. Basically with the tie down, when the battery's in here, instead of lining up the hole with the thread here, it actually goes a lot further out. So what I've done is I just went to O'Reilly's and picked up this universal battery tie down. This is the same one I'm using in my Corolla XRS as well, so I know that it'll work here, hopefully. The other kicker is I have no idea where to put my oil catch can now, because I had my catch can attached to the stock tie down. As you can see right here, I had a hole drilled for it. So what I'm going to do right now is just take off the oil catch can and just run this hose like normal up to the PCV and figure out how I want to mount this later. So this hose is now connected back like normal. I forgot to mention I unplugged the VSV plug here as per the turbokits.com instructions. VSV up here, as you can see, stands for vacuum switching valve, so this just remains unplugged now. I do want to mention real quick, I would like to put this oil catch can back because, as you can see, it has actually caught something. And if we dump it in here, it's not like tons of oil, but there's something in there. This is oil that would otherwise normally end up here inside my intake plenum, so that's actually pretty good considering this is only a $30 oil catch can. Pretty decent. So I will put this back very soon once I figure out a good place to mount it in here, but we're not doing that right now. We've got to mount the battery in here. I'm not going to plug it in yet. I want to finish everything with this car before I connect the battery up. So pretty much that means putting the battery in, then putting the exhaust on, and then maybe putting the catch can back on if I can figure out a good place to mount it here. Otherwise we'll leave the catch can off for now and just run without it for a little bit. Perfect, okay. I think that's pretty much exactly how I want that. I mean, the battery moves more than I'd like, but I mean, I guess it's not gonna fly around anywhere, so it should be okay. So this was the last piece of the puzzle here in the engine bay, and now what I'm going to do is cut up my stock exhaust here because I am going to be reusing it. And yes, I do know that the stock exhaust is not optimal for a turbo setup, but this way I'll at least be able to use something because I don't have a 3-inch exhaust to drop into this thing. So I'll be using this little adapter here to mount the downpipe and the stock exhaust together, and then I'll be using these clamps to clamp them together. And eventually we'll get the stock exhaust swapped out of here and we'll do something with that. But for now, the car will be drivable. I'll be able to test it out, even though the stock exhaust isn't going to have optimal flow. I always thought with this exhaust system that this was the pre-cat and then this was the main cat. I'm pretty sure I'm wrong. This looks more like it would be the main cat because the oxygen sensor is behind it, and this is probably a secondary cat. We will figure out a way of tying this back in so that the car's emissions passable, because of course with the piggyback ECU, the stock ECU still stays there, so when they scan the computer, everything looks good. Now we just have to actually make it emissions compliant, but we will do that later. But now that we've cut it, we can put it back on the car. That's a bit of a tricky situation. So after doing a little bit of trial and error, I've got the exhaust to where I want it to be. As you can see, it goes from the downpipe there to the adapter, now to the stock exhaust, which is in the right position. So what I did, as you can see here by the remains of some of the adapter, I just shortened it up. I probably trimmed, let's see, so this plus that is about 2 inches, I would say. So cutting 2 inches off of that means that now this fits pretty perfectly. And as you can see, it's attached to the exhaust hangers here and it's looking good. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with this. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just clamp it down. So I've got a 3-inch clamp and I've also got a 2.5-inch clamp somewhere. And then the exhaust is done. So as you can see, there it is. It's all clamped together and it's now attached to the muffler again. So we are now ready to lower this thing back onto the ground, fill it up with coolant, load the tune onto the ECU, then we're gonna prime oil to the turbo, and we can start it. Now I was just gonna leave this out of the video, but I do want to mention it very quickly. Earlier in this video, you may have recalled me fitting this Home Depot T for the oil feed line. And as you can see, it's not on the car anymore, it's in my hand. The reason being, I found the one that's actually supposed to go on. I'm not gonna lie, I've not been very well organized, as you can tell, throughout this entire project. And in all the disorganization here, I ended up just misplacing the fitting. I thought the 1.8 NPT male-to-male fitting for the feed line just wasn't here, and a bit silly to think that, considering that Turbokits.com quite literally went and not even that, they triple checked everything and made sure everything in this kit was here. Bit silly to think that they would have missed something like this. So under the car here, I've gone back and installed the proper fitting right there. So I wanted to bring this up because I think after seeing how I kind of missed that, I think it's important for me to mention that for any car project, but especially a car project like this that has a lot of parts, some of them being very small, it is very important to stay organized and not do this. Don't do this. So yeah, I'm setting a bad example here, being so disorganized with everything. So now that we've got that out of the way, the car is fully put back together. And what we can do now is, for the first time in a while, actually lower the car back onto the ground and fill it with oil. Why does this thing feel so low all of a sudden? Well, let's fill it up with oil, and another thing I realized, I gotta put my strut bar back on. So fill it up with oil, put the strut bar on, then we'll go mess with the AFR, and then we should hopefully be able to start it. Well, I mean, we have to put oil to the turbo first, but then after that, should be able to run. So here's the oil that I'm using. It's Castrol GTX. It's only synthetic blend, not full synthetic. That's because synthetic blend is cheaper than synthetic, and this oil is only going to be in the car for about 500 miles. Basically, what Turbokits.com says is when you first get this car running, you've got to break in the turbo, and during the break-in period of the first 500 miles, you should use conventional oil. In this case, I couldn't find conventional oil, so synthetic blend it is. Then after 500 miles, change it out and put in full synthetic oil. This is the first time this car has seen anything besides full synthetic in the past probably 10 years. And Yeah, that's full. And now we can finally connect power back to this thing. Now before we do, I'm going to very quickly take out the electronic fuel injection fuse. Basically what this does is the fuel pump's not going to run, which means the injectors don't run. EFI is 20A, so boom, there it is. And there's an EFI 2 as well, probably a backup fuse, which we'll pull as well. And for good measure, we'll unplug the coil packs as well. I know maybe this is all a little excessive. Basically, the point I'm trying to make is I do not want this car to start right now. When we first go to crank the engine, obviously, there's no oil going to the turbo because the oil has to go through the feed line all the way back up into the turbo. So if we crank it over and it starts, then the turbo is going to be spinning very quickly. Even at idle, it can spin several thousand RPMs with no oil. That is very bad. So now with all of this, we can plug in the battery and then we can go mess with the ECU. Alrighty, so now it is time to work with the ECU. So it's on the second to last page of the instructions. So step 1, open the basecal.fi6 map in FIC folder on your hard drive, then file, save as, rename it to Turbo Base. So we'll do just that. Basecal FI6, open it up. Nope, still the same, can't do anything. What do I do here? What do I do? What do I do with you? Alrighty, so I've been toying around with the software and with the FIC a little bit, and I've finally got it working. How I resolved my issue of the application being weird is I just deleted it and reinstalled it in a different location. So it was installed originally in my C drive, program files, x86. I deleted it from there and reinstalled it from the disk to C/documents. And it's working now. So I mean, let's go ahead and open up the FI6 software, and now we'll go to File, Open, and here we go, Basecal FI6, open it up, and now this is not grayed out anymore. ECU, connect, and now following the instructions, I've opened Basecal.fi6, and now we file, save as, rename it to Turbo Base. So, file, save as, and we rename it to Turbo Base. Boom, save it. So next we open, hang on, so close. Next we open turbobase.fi6 and ECU, connect. A warning box will come up telling you that the maps don't match and to either pull from the FIC or write to the FIC. I can confirm that is exactly what I'm seeing right now. You want to pull from FIC, and the instructions, you can't see it too well, but the instructions say pull from FIC in all caps. Something tells me that I might want to pay attention to it. So we're going to pull from FIC. Transfer of calibration to PC complete. There we go. Now we click OK. Now click File, Save As, and rename it to Turbo Base 2. Turbo Base 2. Then disconnect from the FIC and close the map. Then reopen turbobase.fi6, so Turbo Base 1, and connect to the FIC. Now we're connected. Next, find the Setup menu at the top and click Setup, Calibration. A separate box will open up which will allow you to set the TPS, throttle position, and the RPMs. I can confirm that is exactly what I'm seeing in front of me. These are self-explanatory settings, and the software will walk you through the steps. Once the RPMs and TPS are set, you are done. The map is already on the FIC. Alright, so it looks like to calibrate RPMs, I'm gonna have to actually have the car running. So I think for now, I will just set it to 0, and throttle position, I will also just leave there. Okay, so we'll just have everything set to 0 right now and go from there. Alright, well, the FIC is here, so I've got to put it back in the car first, and then we can go on to the next step. Next thing I want to do is start cranking the engine. I need to get oil from the pressure T all the way through the line up to the turbocharger, and then once we get there, we should be able to start this thing. So when bringing oil up to the turbo, what I'm going to do, as you can see, I put my strut bar back, but I might have to take it off because it'll help give me more space looking at the turbo down here. So what I'm going to do when priming the oil is I'm just going to disconnect this line here and put it in a little plastic bag, and then crank the engine until I see oil coming out of that. Then I know that this is working properly, and then I'll put it back onto the turbo, and then we can start it. I suppose disconnecting the line from the turbo isn't necessary, but without disconnecting the line, if for whatever reason oil isn't going up into the turbo, and I think it is, then when I start it, turbo's going to run with no oil and it's going to destroy it pretty quickly. Disconnecting the line means that I can see when the oil comes out, and if I see no oil coming out of it, then I can go investigating as to why. I've put the end of the feed line, the little plastic bag there. No spark, no fuel, no combustion, no start. Nothing yet. Aha! There's oil. Okay, it's made it up. As you can see, we've got oil, so that means that oil has made its way through the feed line and we are good to go. Now I'm just going to crank it a couple more times just to get oil into the turbo, and then moment of truth. Yes! She lives! Yeah! Oh my gosh! I've got a Turbo Corolla that runs now! Oh my gosh! I had to shut it off though, because turns out I have a very awful exhaust leak. You definitely heard it. So, time to fix the exhaust. But that's for another, we'll fix that in the next video. And then take this thing on its first drive. Wow. The reason I had to not idle it in here is because, I mean, it's a garage, right? It's basically running catless right now with how bad that exhaust leak sounds, and I can really smell it. Oh my god, I'm so excited to actually start driving this thing. I have never gone to an automotive class, and I have never received professional training. I have just done everything on my own and over the years, and now it's led up to this. I'm sorry if this is the part of the video where you get slightly annoyed, because I'm not going to actually drive it, but man, I have to fix the exhaust 100%. It sounds like there's nothing there, but it works. It works, and it's idling, like it idles really smooth too. Granted, it's a bit high, but it was idling quite smooth with 550cc injectors. So clearly, the FIC is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Here's another look at it. There's a little look at the little Turbski. Let's go under the car and see if there's any leaks. Anything? Nothing. It's dry. It's bone dry. Ladies and gentlemen, it is running. It is running. I mean, all of you saw it, of course, but it is running. We have a running, and if I were to drive it, it would drive. We have a running and driving 2007 turbocharged automatic Corolla. We'll see how the automatic holds up over time. I'm betting the engine is going to be fine, but I'm not 100% sure if the transmission is going to like the increase in power. Well, we'll see. The whole reason I'm doing the turbo now is because the car is still automatic. A lot of you guys might know that I am planning on 6-speed manual swapping this car with a C60 from an XRS, Celica GTS, whatever. But I decided I wanted to turbo it while it's automatic because I want to see how the automatic does. So, we'll see over time how this setup works. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous. I was a little nervous, but it's going, it runs. I keep saying that. I've said that 20 times now. You guys know it runs. You just watched the clip where it runs. I don't know why I keep exclaiming that it's running, because you already know, but... Anyway, that is it for this video. It's long enough, clearly. The raw footage to make this video is almost 11 hours long, so I'm gonna have to cut that down to 1 watchable hour. I'm gonna do it, and I did it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you everyone very much for joining me on this adventure, turbocharging the Corolla. One last little look here at the turbocharger. There it is. Let me get some better lighting under here so you can really appreciate that. Also, don't look at the air filter. I have to fix that. But it's okay for now. Thank you everyone very much for watching, and I will see you all when we do our first test drive in this thing.